I'll be right there, Lou rapped, and then added, if there are any windows open in there, shut them. For God's sake, there's a storm coming. He hung up without saying goodbye. Well, Laurie asked, he's on his way, Trent said, and laughed grimly. He ran back to the intersection of Maple and Walnut. The sky had grown very dark now. And the sound of thunder had become almost constant. As they reached the mailbox in the corner, street lights along Maple Street began to come on. Lisa and Brian hadn't arrived yet. I want to come with you, Trent, Laurie said, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. No way, Trent said. Wait for Brian and Lisa. At their names, Laurie turned and looked down Walnut Street and saw them coming, hurrying along with lunchboxes bounding in their hands. Could the three of you go behind Mrs. Redland's hedge there and wait for Lou to pass? Then he came up on the street, but don't go into the house and don't let them either. Wait for me outside. I'm afraid, Trent. The tears had begun to spill down her cheeks now. Me too, Sprat, he said and kissed her swiftly on the forehead, but it'll be all over soon. Before she could say anything else, Trent went up the street and toward the Bradbury's house and on Maple Street. He glanced at his watch and as he ran, it was 3:12. The house had a still, hot air that scared him. It was as if gunpowder had been spilled in every corner. People could not see. He could not see what was standing by light unseen fuses. He imagined the house and the ones that were ticking relentlessly away, now reading 001906. What if Lou was late? Trent raced up to the third floor through the still combustible air. He imagined he could feel the house stirring now, coming alive as the countdown neared its conclusion. He went into the study, Lou's study, opened 2 or 3 file cabinets and desk drawers at random. He threw the papers he found all over the floor. He was just finishing when he heard the Porsche driving up the street. Trent stepped out of the office and grabbed his hand in his pocket for a key, but it was empty except for an old crumpled lunch ticket. I must have lost it running up the street. It must have bounced right out of my pocket. He stood there sweating and frozen as the Porsche squealed in the driveway, its engine cut out. The driver's door opened and slammed shut. Lou's footsteps ran from the back door. The thunder crumpled like an artillery shell in the sky. A stroke of bright lightning poured through the gloom, and somewhere deep in the house, a powerful motor turned over, uttering a low, muffled bark, and began to hum. What do we do? What can I do? He's bigger than me. If I try to hit him over the head, he'll... He slipped his hand in his left hand in his other pocket, and the sauce broke off as it touched the old-fashioned metal teeth of the key. At some point during the long afternoon in the park, he must have transferred it from one pocket to the other without even being aware of it. Gasping, heart galloping in his stomach and throat as well as in his chest, Trent faded back into the hall, down in the hall into the luggage closet, stepped inside and pulled the accordion-style doors most of the way shut in front of him. Lou was galloping up the stairs, bawling his wife's name over and over at the top of his voice. Trent saw him, hair standing up in spikes, his tie askew, big drops of sweat standing out over his broad, intelligent forehead. Eyes squinted down to furious little slits. "Catherine," he bawled and ran down in the hall into the office. Trent was out of the luggage closet and running soundlessly back down the hall. He would have just one chance. If he missed the keyhole, if the key failed to turn, if either of those things, I'll fight with him, he said, time to think. If I can't send him alone, I'll make damn sure to take him with me. He grabbed the door and banged it shut. He caught one glimpse of Lou's startled face, and the key was in the lock. He twisted it, and the bolt shot right across an instant before Luke struck the door. "Hey," Lou shouted. "Hey, what are you doing? Where's Catherine? Let me out of here." The knob twisted back and forth, then it stopped, and Lou rained a fusillade of blows on the door. Let me out of here right now, Trent Bradbury, before you get the worst beating of your life. Trent backed slowly across the hall. When his shoulder struck the far wall, he gasped. The key had dropped from his fingers. Now that it was done, reaction set in. The world began to look wavery, as if he were underwater. And he had to fight to keep from fanning himself. Only now, with Lou locked in and his mother sent off on a wild goose chase and the other kids safely tucked away behind Mrs. Redland's overgrown yew hedge, did he realize he never really expected it would work at all. If Daddy Lou was surprised to find himself locked in, Trent Bradbury was absolutely amazed. The door handle was studied, twisted back and forth in short half circles. Let me out now. I'll let you out at 4:15, Lou, Trent said in an uneven, trembling voice, and then little giggles escaped him. If you're still here at 4:15, that is. Then from downstairs. Trent, are you alright? Dear God, that was Laurie. Are you Trent? And listen. Hey Trent, are you okay? And Brian. Trent looked at his watch and was horrified to see it was 3:31, going on 3:32. I suppose his watch was slow. Get out, he screamed down to them. Get out of this house. The third floor hallway seemed to stretch out before him like taffy, though the faster he ran, the farther it seemed to stretch out ahead of him. Lou rained blows on the door and curses from the air. A thunder boomed, and from deep within the house came the ever more urgent sound of machines waking up to life. He reached the stairwell at last and hurried down, hurtling down the stairs to the first floor, where his brother and two sisters waited, looking up at him. Out! He screamed, grabbing them and shoving them out the open door in the stormy blackness outside. Quick! Trent, what's happening? Brian asked. What's happening to the house? It's shaking. It was too. A deep vibration rose up to the floor and rattled Trent's eyeballs in their sockets. Plaster began to sift into his hair. No time, out. Fast, Laurie, help me. Trent swept Brian into his arms. Laurie grabbed Lissa and stumbled out the door. Thunder bammed, lightning twisted across the sky. The wind that had been gasping earlier now began to roar like a dragon. Trent heard an earthquake building under the house. As he ran out through the door with Brian, he saw electric blue light shoot out through the narrow cellar windows. It cut across the lawn and raised and almost looked solid. He heard the glass break. Just as he passed through the door, he felt the house rising under his feet. He jumped down the front steps and grabbed Laurie's arm. They stumbled and staggered down the wall to the street, which was now as black as night with the coming of the storm. And they turned back and watched it happen. The house on Maple Street seemed to gather itself. It no longer looked straight and solid. Huge cracks ran out from it, not only in the cement block, but in the earth surrounding it. The lawn pulled apart. Roots strained blackly upward below the rain. The whole front of the yard seemed a bubble shape, as if it were straining to hold the house before which it had spread out for so long. Trent cast his eyes up to the third floor. For the light and loose study was still showing. Trent thought the sound of breaking glass had come was coming from up there. It was a year later that Laurie told him she was quite sure she heard their stepfather screaming. The foundation of the house first crumbled and cracked, then thundered with the croak of exploding mortar. Brilliant, cold blue fire lanced out. The children covered their eyes and staggered back. Engines screamed. The earth pulled up and up in at last agonizing holding action and then let go. Suddenly the house was a foot above the ground, resting on a pad of bright blue fire. It was a perfect liftoff. The house rose slowly at first and began to gather speed. It thundered upward on its flaring pad of blue fire, the front door clapping madly back and forth as it went. The house reached a height of 30 yards. It seemed to poise itself for its great leap upward and then blasted into a rushing spate of night black clouds. It was going. "Look out, Trent," Laurie cried a second or two later and shoved it hard enough to knock him over. The rubberback welcome mat whacked into the street where he had been standing. Trent looked at Laurie. Laurie looked back. "That would have killed you if I'd hit you on the head," she told him. "So you better not call me Sprat anymore, Trent." He looked at her solemnly for several seconds and began to giggle. Laurie joined in, so did the little ones. Brian took one of Trent's hands and Alyssa took the other. They helped him, pulled him to his feet, and the four of them stood together looking at the smoking cellar hole in the middle of the shattered dwelling. People were coming out of their houses now. "Wow," Brian said reverently. "Our house took off, Trent." "Yeah," Trent said. Trent and Laurie put their arms around each other and began to shriek with mingled laughter and horror, and that was when the rain began to pelt down. The Bradbury children sat on the curb, Trent and Laurie in the middle, Brian and Alyssa on the sides. Laurie leaned toward Trent and whispered in his ear, "We're free." "It's better than that," Trent said. "She is." Then he put his arms around all of them. By stretching, he could just manage, and they sat on the curb in the pouring rain and waited for their mother to come home.